Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we review books of every genre, trying to find the best of everything that's fun and escapist. Today we are reviewing the book called Grace of the Empire State by Gemma Tizzard. And this is a historical fiction set in the 1920s. It's in the Great Depression, kind of at the beginning and going through the Great Depression. And so the plot is, let's just say in the author's note, the author posed a question. She was interested in the Empire State Building, and she's like, okay, what would happen if a woman helped build the Empire State Building? And so the author kind of mulled that over and was like, okay, what circumstances would allow a woman to be part of the building? Because a woman would not have been allowed to help with the, construction of the steel in that era. So what circumstances would lead to that? And then on the opposite side of that, what circumstances would lead a woman to try and do that? And then what would the consequences be? So what we have is, the setup is that there are twins, and obviously the construction of the Empire State Building is real, but all of our characters that we focus on are imaginary. The author does sprinkle in some realism, but for the most part, every character you encounter is not historically real. Anyway, so our main characters are twins, fraternal twins. So the boy, the man, has been hired to work on steel on the Empire State Building. The sister has a completely different focus. She has no interest in that. She is a dancer. And so she wants to dance on Broadway. And what ends up happening, the circumstances are that the twin brother breaks his arm. And he's like, shoot, I cannot continue my job with a broken arm. And at the same time, the sister loses her job due to the Great Depression. People are just not showing up to Broadway dance at the level that she is, which is the low level Broadway. So they've canceled her show and she can't find another job. And so they talk about it and go, neither of us can get another job, but if she takes her brother's place, dresses like a boy, and her little crew that that her brother is part of, like 3-4 other people, know what's going on. So they, let those people know, but not the boss, because the boss would never go for this. Then she can take her brother's place and work on the steel long enough for her brother's arm to heal. And then they could swap back. No one will be the wiser. It will all be good, and they will have some income for their family. So that is kind of the plot premise to this, is all about how those circumstances come about, what are the results of those circumstances, and ultimately how it resolves. So the historical deals, so things I like, the historical details. So I will give this an okay as far as whether I like this particular aspect or not. And that's partially because it's 100 years ago. It is recent enough that the historical details don't always feel terribly interesting or dramatic or whatever. It's not like you're learning a huge amount. There are some though. So for example, the costs of a meal. You can get a full meal for about 5 to 10 cents. I mean, that's kind of interesting to think of. The cost of monthly rent. The circumstances around the Great Depression can be interesting. The circumstances on building the steel, how the steel workers set up their stuff and how they, get the steel up there and all of that. That can be interesting. Not, again, dramatically interesting, because there's not a huge difference between today and 100 years ago in a big city. But there's enough there to be interesting. So I liked that part. Our main character, for the most part, is a pretty good character. I didn't always relate to her choices, like she loses her job and she goes out drinking, or she really loves to get lost and dance. And, these are things that just I can't relate to that. But, and I couldn't relate to her necessarily initial reaction to her family, kind of, having a screaming match in the hallway kind of thing. But there's a lot of things to like about her. So she will sacrifice her dreams for her family, whether that's financially, whether that's physically, or whatever. Her family needs her to get this job, even though she doesn't really want to, she will do so. Things like that, it's admirable. Later on in the story, and this is a kind of a spoiler, although not a huge spoiler because the prologue kind of hints at what's going to happen, but she has to rescue somebody on the Empire State Building, and doing so reveals that she's female, and she had a choice there. She could have let the guy die, but instead she loses her job, because she reveals that she's female. So things like that, where I admire those choices, but not everything that she does is perfect. So I thought the author did a decently good job with our main character. The ending is pretty good. It feels real in the aspect of our main character gets fired, right? And not everything is going happy in her life. The ending is a happily ever after, in that things, miraculously get better for her family, and for her specifically, and her dreams and stuff, but it doesn't feel totally like everything is perfect. It's more happy than not for an ending, and I like happily ever afters. So I'll say I liked the ending. It did feel fairly satisfying. It felt like it wrapped up all the threads, so it did a good job in the ending. Things I didn't like. So there are some serious lack of realism as well. So obviously happily ever after in this circumstance probably isn't realistic, but I'm okay with that because I like happily ever afters. But there are some other things that are unrealistic. So the dramatic climactic rescue of somebody, it did feel a little bit unrealistic. She falls and miraculously, saves herself as she's falling in midair. You're like, oh my goodness. It's a little Hollywood there. There are also some aspects that are unrealistic that have to do with the era. So this is one of those really hard things for an author to deal with, I think, which is historically non-politically correct situations. So, for example, in the beginning, our Grace, our main character, is professionally dancing. And this includes dancing with the public. So the public comes in and is like, here's my 10 cents. I will dance with whichever girl I pick. I pick her, and she has to go dance with that person for a split of the money. At the end of the day, if she's danced all, however many hours with people, she gets a whole $1. Which that's kind of interesting for the money aspect. But anyway, she's happy with that. So whatever. But anyway, part of that, they introduce that scene, and one of the characters that come up is black. And he gives his money, and she chooses to dance with him. But the boss comes up and has that racist attitude of, he's black, there are other paying customers, pick another paying customer before you pick him. He can be at the end of the line. Now that is racist, obviously, blatantly bad, but it's consistent with the era. Our main character, however, just defies him, is like, whatever, I'm going to go dance with who I want, and picks the black person and goes and dances with him. So what I come away with this is that the difficulty, right? The racist aspect is realistic. Our main character's response to that is actually not. It is modern sensibilities, but it would be really hard to make a likable character that went along with her boss. I mean, you can do it as in she's just following orders kind of thing, and she, slinks back and grumbles to herself. And that's, that would probably be more realistic of a defiant response. Instead, that she blatantly just goes out and dances with him. So that's what I'm getting at there is modern sensibilities pressed into a historical context that I can't dislike the modern sensibilities in this respect. I mean, I don't want our main characters to be horribly racist, but it isn't realistic. So there's that. I don't love the lack of realism in some of these areas, even though it is somewhat better, if you see what I'm saying. So overall, for the racist aspect, it's not a huge part of the book, but it is definitely there, and it isn't historically accurate, I don't feel like. But I don't think that that necessarily takes away from the book. So I'm trying to say it's kind of okay, but just using that as an example of how it's not always historically accurate, and I didn't always love that. Okay, my last and biggest problem, though, with this book is that it feels kind of generic, bland, forgettable. I mean, this is the kind of book that somebody who likes historical fiction could read this and go, oh yeah, that was kind of a lighthearted thing, and you put it down and you never think about it again. This is not a standout book. It is just, it's okay. And that's going to end up being my final rating. It's just okay for a book. It doesn't jump and pop and sparkle in any way to really make me go, yes, go out and read it. Instead, it's just like, it was okay. So that's going to be my final thought on this is it's okay if you like this kind of thing and maybe you would enjoy it, but if historical fiction is not really strongly your love of fiction, then I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think that it'd be worth going out of your way to find. Okay, so on to part 2. I'm going to do next Shield of Sparrows. So this is a fantasy romance, and it's a fairly lengthy book. I like the painting on the pages there. And it's supposed to be, the trope seems to be that our main female character is tricked into who she's marrying, and ends up being, getting to know her husband, even though she doesn't know that that's her husband. And the fantasy aspect seems to be monsters all over the place, so it's kind of a fantasy realm, but I think the focus is on the relationship, the romance. So if you like romantic fantasy, then join me for the next book. Otherwise, I should say who it's by. So Shield of Sparrows by Devaney Perry. That's the book. All right, so thank you for watching, and I hope you join me next time.